and welcome to the Rational Living Show. I am your host, Dr. Aldo Pucci. This is a weekly show that is broadcast live every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern United States time. This is our 10th podcast already. Time flies. I'm president of the National Association of Cognitive Behavioral Therapists. We're based in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area. I developed rational living therapy, which is a type of cognitive behavioral therapy. Rational living therapy focuses on the fact that our thoughts cause our feelings and behaviors, not people and things and situations and events. And I've been very blessed to have taught over the past 40 years thousands and thousands of mental health professionals all across the United States and abroad, and provide supervision, et cetera, every week. I'm also the author of 2 books, The Client's Guide to Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, which is now in its 2nd edition, and Feel the Way You Want to Feel No Matter What. And you can find both of those books on Amazon.com. Okay, and this is an interactive show. So if you're listening on Podbean, you can use the Podbean app to call in with your questions. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have. And if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, X, or LinkedIn, you can type in your questions, and I will be happy to answer them. The title of this week's episode is Motivating Yourself Even When Feeling Depressed. Even when feeling depressed. We talked about last week about the fact that depression is the result of thinking hopelessly about something that you think you need, you have to have, you believe you just cannot live without. As a matter of fact, I'm going to show this on the screen here for those of you who are watching online. We talked about the difference between depression and sadness. And so we begin with hopeless thinking, and most people, including many therapists, think that hopeless thinking by itself causes depression. And what I teach is that not only does hopeless thinking by itself not cause depression, hopeless thinking cannot by itself cause depression. The determining factor is what a person is thinking hopelessly about. Is it something they think they need, or is it something they think they want? That makes all the difference in the world. Because if a person thinks hopelessly about something they realize they only want, then they feel sad. They're disappointed. However, if a person thinks hopelessly about something they think they need, they have to have, they cannot live without, as if it were air or food or water to them, that is when people make themselves very depressed. Okay? And so the hopeless thinking is really this idea that believing you'll never get it, right? That there's no chance. So the point is this, is that depression requires both hopeless thinking and a need kind of belief. Because if a person thinks that they need something, they have to have it, they cannot live without it, but they believe it's readily available, then they'll just go get it, right? They won't feel depressed. Or if a person is thinking hopelessly about something they realize is optional, that they only want it, they in no way need it, like their life depends on it, then the worst they'll feel is sad. But if a person thinks hopelessly about something that they're equating with air and food and water, and you can see it in their action that they are, right? That they're making themselves miserable over their wife having left them, for example. So they're thinking hopelessly about her ever returning, and they treat her as if she is air and food and water. They'll feel very depressed. Yeah, the person will. So I also mentioned last week that what encourages depressive thinking to persist is inaction. Okay? Inaction. And as a matter of fact, I call this the rational living therapy behavioral loop model. What makes depression persist? It's inaction, lying around, not doing much productive, refusing to work toward a goal that you're thinking hopelessly about. And what all of that is negatively reinforced. You might remember negative reinforcement. So first of all, reinforcement is something that encourages a behavior to be repeated. So when you hear of reinforcement in behavioral terms, a reinforcer is anything that increases the likelihood that a person will repeat the behavior. So with negative reinforcement, it's taking something aversive away. So for example, you have a headache, you take aspirin, aspirin removes the headache, that taking the aspirin becomes negatively reinforced. And so therefore, you're more likely to take aspirin again the next time you have a headache, since it took it away the last time, the headache. So therefore, if I remain on the couch, I avoid disappointment, right? If I just remain on the couch feeling sorry for myself, then I will avoid any disappointment about, let's say, if my wife left me, about her returning, or perhaps, attracting someone else, or what have you. So if I remain on the couch, I avoid also doing things that I don't feel like doing, right? So that's negative reinforcement. Also, remaining inactive, lying on the couch all day, provides negative reinforcement for the belief as well, the depressive belief. In other words, I would not be lying around all day if my situation were not hopeless. So inaction is depression's best friend, okay? And by the way, if you are a therapist and would like to get trained in rational living therapy approach, I encourage you to visit cbtonlinetraining.com. That's cbtonlinetraining.com. Okay, so now, how what can we do about this inaction? So let's first break down this inaction response to depressive feelings into the ABCs. So for example, a very typical scenario. A, what am I aware of? I'm aware that I'm feeling depressed, that I have low energy, that I have no desire to do much of anything. B, what do I think? I can't do anything unless I feel motivated, unless I am motivated. Another thought might be, it's too hard for me to do. Another thought might be, what's the point? What's the point in me getting off of this couch? And so therefore, because let's say I thought that way, at C, therefore, I would feel even more depressed. I might withdraw, and certainly I would be more likely, thinking that way, to remain on the couch. However, when challenging these thoughts, we can come to the conclusion a good rational replacement thought, or replacement thoughts for this, would be something like, I don't need to feel like doing it to do it. See, that's one of the biggest myths that people believe, that they fall for, is that you have to feel like doing something to do it. And that's just not the case at all. What you have to have is the ability to do it. And so if a person's paralyzed, for example, they're going to have a very difficult time getting off of the couch. But depression doesn't make you unable to get off the couch. So a person might not feel like getting off the couch, but it doesn't mean that they cannot. Another rational replacement thought would be something like, action is uncomfortable, but not unbearable. And also, doing something is better than doing nothing. Okay? So forcefully working at disputing those irrational thoughts. I have to feel like moving. I have to feel like getting out of bed or off the couch. I have to feel like going for a walk to do it. And that's just it's not a fact at all. Another strategy is activity scheduling. Okay, very important when a person depresses him or herself. And so if you are depressing yourself, activity scheduling could be very helpful and very important to you. Okay. And someone, matter of fact, just asked, should you have an activity schedule? Absolutely. And that's what we're about to talk about here. And as a matter of fact, this is non-negotiable medicine. This isn't just optional advice. If you're wanting to feel better, to stop feeling depressed, this is very important. So it's important to start very small with your activity scheduling. Schedule specific times, not vague intentions. So at 2:00, I'm going for a 10-minute walk, or even a 5-minute or 2-minute walk at first, if that's what it takes. Focus on completion, not perfection. Okay? Focus on completion, not perfection. So examples of activity scheduling would be things like going for a 10-minute walk, taking a shower and getting dressed, even if staying home, cleaning one small area of your home, calling one person on the phone, just very small tasks at first. And then you can use activity scheduling to schedule something every day to look forward to, something that you enjoy. And so you are intentionally scheduling these things rather than, because what a lot of people do, especially if they're depressing themselves, they will wake up in the morning and think, well, I'll do something that I look forward to at some point today. But because they haven't scheduled it, the next thing they know, it's time to go to bed and they haven't done much of anything. Okay, so scheduling a specific time, scheduling specific days of the week that you do these various things that you enjoy, that you look forward to. But at first, it's important just to get moving, even if that just means, running your brush or your comb through your hair when you haven't been doing that. These are very important things. Okay. So remember, you're not trying to feel better with doing these things. You are doing behaviors, better behaviors, and the feelings will follow. Because now, of course, we need to examine and dispute our irrational thoughts that cause us to feel depressed. But the fact is that it's very important to get moving, because one thing we know is that inaction produces lethargy. And so if you've ever spent, for example, a Sunday afternoon all day lying around watching football, you know that sometimes, I know for me, sometimes I feel more fatigue. I'm more tired at the end of a day like that than if I had, been moving, if I got up and moved around. And so inaction causes lethargy, and often that gets labeled as depression, by the way. Okay. Someone asked, should you reward yourself somehow? That is a good idea. So as a matter of fact, what you can do is what we call contingent reinforcement, to say, I'm going to reward myself this way only when I do this thing today. So today at 8:00, I'm going to take a shower, I'm going to get dressed, and then I'll reward myself for having done that. Okay. Another very important technique is what we call acting as if. And acting as if helps you to change your physiology. What can happen is that what research has demonstrated is that the longer we remain in a certain physical position or state, the more likely it is that our mindset will follow, will continue. And what that is known as it's known as mind lock. Okay, so the longer a person remains on the couch, feeling depressed in reaction to his girlfriend having left him, the more likely it is that his depressive mindset will continue. And so to help to unlock the mind, it's important to get the body moving. And so what I like to have folks do is a little experiment. And you can do this as well if you've been depressing yourself and haven't been doing much in the way of action, is for the next week, act as if you've never felt happier in your life. Even if it seems like you have absolutely nothing to feel happy about, act as though you're happy. So walk erect, walk with a bounce in your step. Put a warm, soft smile on your face, even if you have to prop the corners of your mouth up with your fingers, which research shows that just changes in facial expression changes the physiology of the brain. So act as if you've never felt happier in your life. Now, that by itself will not solve your problem, feeling depressed, but it will put you on the right path to benefit from your rational self-counseling methods and efforts. Okay, and so acting as if will help you. So just very practical tools. If you've been slouching over, you're feeling depressed, sit upright. Make eye contact with people if you've been avoiding it. Speak clearly, even if you don't feel it, because a lot of times when people depress themselves, they kind of mumble, and walk with a purpose, like I said, walk like you're going somewhere that is important for you to go. Put a warm, soft smile on your face, even if you have to force it. Okay. So the question is this: if someone watched you on mute, okay, so let's say there was a video of you online, and they turned the sound off, would they say you looked depressed, or you looked happy, or calm? What would they say? So act as though you've never felt happier in your life. And that by no means will be the solution to your problem, but it will put you on the right path to benefiting from your self-counseling efforts. Okay? So it's very important to directly confront the idea that I need motivation to do it. I need motivation to get myself moving. Well, you need a reason, obviously, and wanting to feel better is a pretty good reason. But otherwise, you don't have to feel like it. Just do it. Okay. So some common blocks are attitudes such as, I don't have any energy. Well, sure you do. And as a matter of fact, if you've just been lying around in bed or just been lying around on your couch or what have you, if your fire alarm sounded and you smelled smoke and you saw there was a fire, it's very likely that you'd get yourself off the couch or out of the bed and out of your house, right? So it's amazing the energy you would realize that you actually have if you were in a desperate situation like that. Sometimes people fall for the idea, but it's too hard to do. No, it might be unpleasant. It might take being a little more forceful with yourself than you ordinarily are. But it's how difficult is it really to get out of the bed and walk across the room, or to I'll give you an example. Years ago, actually 22 years ago, I had heart bypass surgery. Now, I wasn't depressed. I didn't depress myself about that. That isn't why. But what happened was when I came home, I was dizzy. And I was dizzy for days and days. And so my desire was just to remain in the chair and just so I wouldn't have to get up and feel dizzy. As long as I was sitting, it seemed like I was okay. But I knew I couldn't remain in the chair for the rest of my life. So eventually I got forceful with myself. And so I stood up and I walked across the room. We have a large area that's both a dining room and then the kitchen. They're connected. And so I walked over and I hit the the cabinet that's there, and then I walked to the other end where the kitchen was and hit the counter and walked back over to my chair. Then the next day I did that twice, and I kept increasing that, being forceful with myself until I realized that I could get up and be okay and I could do it. Because at first I thought I couldn't, but I just made myself do it, and I proved to myself that I could. And so that's the kind of thing that is important for you to do if you've been depressing yourself. I just can't do it because it's too hard. Nonsense. Another idea that people fall for is nothing helps, nothing will help. Well, the fact is, if you don't take action and do it, you won't find out. And as a matter of fact, when we talk about hopeless thinking, we're going to perhaps next week talk about how to attack hopeless thinking. One of the things to consider about hopeless thinking is that it's a major case of jumping to conclusions. But here's the key question to ask yourself if you're thinking, oh, it's not going to work. How would acting as though I've never felt happier in my life, how would putting a warm, soft smile on my face, how would get up and moving actually make me feel better? There's a great question to ask yourself in situations like that, and that is, what do I have to lose? What do I have to lose? It's not like anyone's asking you to jump out of an airplane without a parachute to see if you can land on your feet. All you're being asked to do is, and asking yourself to do, is just get up and move. Just put a smile on your face, take a shower, go for a little walk. These various things, taking small steps like someone asked. And so you have nothing to lose, even if it doesn't work, but I'm here to tell you it will. Now, of course, we still have to, it's important for us to combat the depressive thinking, that's causing us to feel depressed to begin with. But what helps to make that depressive thinking persist is inaction. In other words, it's very convenient, isn't it? I'm thinking there's no hope, but I don't do anything to see if maybe I might be wrong. So it's no wonder depression just loves inaction. It's no wonder inaction is depression's best friend, because as long as I remain on the couch or in bed, I don't give myself a chance to see that I might be wrong. Okay. So what happens then is what we're doing is working at building momentum. Okay. So we have a little action produces a slight improvement, which leads to more action, which leads to a little more improvement. You see, it's just like exercising. You start off with a small amount of time, like maybe 5 minutes walking, and then you build up to 10, and then you build up to 15. You don't run a marathon the first time you go walking or running, and it's the same thing. We're building momentum. Okay, that's why we want to start small and have successes along the way. Okay. However, I want to ask you, are you telling yourself, oh, but I'll just do it later? If you are, how often does later actually come? Okay. Are you waiting for that perfect moment that never comes? No, there is no perfect moment. Just do it. Just get up and do it. So therefore, pick specific times, of the day, specific behaviors, get yourself moving, act as though you have somewhere to go and something to do. Refuse to assume that because you think there is no hope, no solution to your problem, that you have to be right. A lot of people have this attitude, I think, what's the old saying? I think, therefore I am, right? But a lot of people have the attitude, I think, therefore I'm right. Now, just because we think a thought does not mean that thought is correct, okay? So so commit to doing various things each day that will help you. If you haven't been bathing, bathe. If you haven't been dressing, get yourself dressed as if you have somewhere to go. Go somewhere, even if it's just to the store for a few minutes. Get out and go, and you'll see that it will help. And so you don't need motivation. It doesn't have to be something grand. Just realizing I want to feel better. Okay, it looks like we have, someone asked, let's see, shouldn't we rule out any physiological causes for depression? Okay, that's a great question. First of all, and we covered this last week, you might have missed it. First of all, we in rational living therapy, we differentiate between depression and depressive-like symptoms. Okay, how we define depression in rational living therapy is a person is aware of something. It has three components. Person is aware of something. They think depressing thoughts about what they're aware of, and then they feel depressive feelings and engage in depressive behaviors because of that depressive thinking about what they're aware of. Okay, so depression has three components. You're aware of something, you think depressing thoughts about it, and then you feel and act depressed as a result of that depressive thinking. And so if you don't have all three components, then it's not depression. So if a person is not reacting to something, so one of the very first questions I ask someone, as a matter of fact, the first question I ask someone when they tell me, Dr. Pucci, I've been feeling depressed, the very first thing I ask them is, what have you been feeling depressed about? If they can say to me, well, you see, doctor, my wife left me, and then right after that, I lost my job, and I don't think there's any way for me to get them back, and just been so depressed about that, then I know they're reacting to something. Instead, if they say, nothing's been going on for me to be depressed about. This came on all of a sudden, so I don't know why I'm feeling so down. And they might also say, my hair's been falling out, my hands have been cold, my heart's been skipping beats and all that. Then it very well could be that they have a thyroid problem, perhaps hypothyroidism. But if that's the case, they don't have a problem with depression, they have a problem with their thyroid. Okay? So, and then if a person demonstrates voluntary control over how they're feeling. So in other words, if I put my mind on something else, I feel differently. That's demonstrating some amount of voluntary control, and therefore, that's another sign of learned depression as opposed to not learned, which is a physiological problem. Okay, so if they're showing definite signs of learned behavior, then we likely will assume that it's a learned problem, it's actual depression, and they can benefit from the therapy. Instead, matter of fact, I'll give you an example. Many years ago, about 40 years ago now, when I was living in another state, this family brought an elderly woman in, and they said to me, our mother's depressed. Well, how do you know she's depressed? Well, because all of a sudden she stopped cooking, she stopped eating, she just seems down, has no energy, and they figured that this was depression. But when I talked with her, she said it came on very suddenly. She nothing happened, nothing was going on for her to feel depressed about, and she just didn't understand. But she also said that her hair was falling out. She didn't have much of an appetite, and a variety of other symptoms that to me suggested a problem with her thyroid. So I said, let's get you checked out medically and see what might be going on, because I suspect you have a medical problem, perhaps hypothyroidism. I didn't see her for about another month and a half. And the reason I didn't was because she spent a month in the hospital with the doctors trying to straighten out her thyroid problem. When she came back to me, she was like a different woman. I mean, it was just incredible. So there was an example of a not learned problem, but I didn't call it depression because it wasn't depression. It was a thyroid problem. Instead of, she had said, well, you see, I'm really missing my husband who died recently, and you know, a variety of other things she was reacting to that she was depressing herself about, then we likely would have just started in with the therapy, and she likely would have done well with it. Okay, but no amount of counseling or psychotherapy was going to correct her thyroid problem. Okay. All right, let's see. Someone said, I really appreciate the analogy to working out and getting better a little at a time. Yeah, this is similar to the impatience, low frustration tolerance, which is a concept that has really been helpful to me. Yeah, absolutely. So it takes time, it takes effort, it takes patience, but you put one foot in front of the other, you know, and as the song says, soon you'll be walking out the door, right? I think that's from Santa Claus is Coming to Town, if I'm not mistaken. But anyhow, that's the point, is that just begin small and just keep moving, and you'll do better. And but the rational self-counseling, the examining and correcting the depressive thoughts that cause you to feel depressed are very, very important. Someone asked about exercise and supplements for depression. Certainly exercise can be helpful. Some things that can be helpful as well are omega-3 fatty acids. People often get those from fish oil capsules. And you want to make sure that they're distilled. I think the Now company, NOW, has a distilled fish oil supplement. So omega-3 fatty acids can help. St. John's wort, L-tyrosine, but make sure you ask your doctor and pharmacist about those things if you're thinking about taking them, because they might interfere or interact with medications that you're taking, or they might not be appropriate for you medically, especially if you're taking an antidepressant. Ask your doctor about it before taking any of those things. All right, so just checking to see if we have any other questions. All right, so get yourself moving. You don't have to feel like it to do it. Just do it. And schedule. Activity scheduling is so important. And make a commitment. As a matter of fact, if you involve others, that can be even more helpful, because if they know what you're doing, they can be there for you and do it with you, perhaps. Go for a walk with you. And that can be very, very helpful. So the Rational Living Show is broadcast every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern United States time. Make sure to share our podcast with your friends and family, and maybe your therapist if you go to a therapist. Also, please visit our website, nacbt.org is one of them, nacbt.org. That's the National Association of Cognitive Behavioral Therapists website. And if you'd like training in rational living therapy, please visit cbtonlinetraining.com. And so thank you so much for your support, and I pray that these podcasts are helpful to you, and if you know someone that it would be helpful for, share the recording of the podcast with them. Everyone, take care, and looking forward to Lord willing, seeing you next Wednesday.